All right, this is a brief audio review of Chapter 4, Max Weber, for Theories of Social Behavior. Okay, so just a little bit about Weber to give some context. So Weber was born in Germany in 1864, and he got meningitis, and even though he recovered, throughout the rest of his life he suffered the physical and emotional after effects of the disease, specifically anxiety and nervous tension. So from an early age, books were really important to Weber. So because he was sick, he was in bed, he was reading a lot, which kind of pushed him down this path to later earn a PhD in economic and legal history in 1889, and then took a position as a lecturer at the University of Berlin. Throughout his life, Weber was torn by the personal struggles between his mother and father. He followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a lawyer and joining the same organizations as his father at the University of Heidelberg. And Weber's feverish work ethic, he drove himself mercilessly, denying himself all leisure that can be understood as a combination of his father's intellectual accomplishments and his mother's moral resolve. So Weber experienced debilitating anxiety and insomnia throughout his whole life. He often resorted to taking opium in order to sleep. Despite resigning his academic post, traveling, resting, the anxiety could not be dispelled. So he marries Marianne Weber, or of course, Marianne Schnichter. I'm not a great German name pronunciator. What can I do? Very American. So anyway, Marianne Weber, I put some videos in the additional resources about her. She's kind of the unsung hero of Max Weber's story. We still talk about Max Weber, but we don't really talk about how his wife herself was also a sociologist, was also a feminist, intellectual, and again, in her own right, was a sociologist outside of her husband. She and Max made a conscious effort to establish an egalitarian relationship in the 1800s, right? And they worked together on a lot of intellectual projects. In 1894, Weber joined the faculty at Freiburg University as a full professor of economics and traveled to the U.S. in 1904 to formulate the argument that would then become the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism that we'll cover in a moment. So in 1920, at the age of 56, Weber died of pneumonia, but Marianne continued living another 34 years and completed several of his important manuscripts that were left unfinished at the time of his death. So basically, if, any of the theories of Weber make sense, you've heard about Weber throughout your time in sociology classes, then you can basically thank Marianne, his wife, for that reason. Okay, so one of his first terminology, we'll go through a lot of this more in depth in a moment, but Verstehen is a German word that means imperative understanding. Weber defines sociology as a science which attempts the interpretive understanding of social action in order thereby to arrive at a causal explanation of its course and effects. So basically, he means that subjective understandings, or the ability to understand individuals or groups, comes from the perspective of the observed. So it's basically being able to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. So he was really turning his attention to the subjective dimensions of social life, seeking to understand the states of mind or motivations that guide an individual's behavior. So Weber specified social action to mean, and this is his quote, that which by virtue of the subjective meaning attached to it by the acting individual or individuals takes into account of the behavior of others and is thereby oriented in its course. So this action can be either observable or internal to the actor's imagination, and it can involve a deliberate intervening in a given situation or abstaining of involvement or acceptance. So basically, it can be what someone does or doesn't do based on the meanings that are attached to an action, and we'll go through those different ones in a moment here. So Weber was really interested in rationalization of society. And so he was looking at, again, the motivations for why people do what they do. So he categorized these different kinds of actions, 4 social actions. So the first one is instrumental rational action. This is a social action that's pursued after evaluating consequences and considering the means to achieve something. An example could be a person trying to decide the ways they could potentially end up making more money and what decisions they have to make towards certain things to meet that goal. So instrumental rational action is geared towards the efficient pursuit of goals through calculating the advantages and the disadvantages associated with possible means for realizing those goals. Value rational action is a little bit different. This refers to behaviors based on the values that an individual may hold. So like instrumental rational action, Value rational action involves a conscious strategic selection of means capable to effectively achieve your goal. However, value rational action is pursued as an end to itself, not because it serves as a means for achieving an ulterior goal. So an example of value rational action could be a soldier who sacrifices themselves for their country. They don't do it for money, they do it because of their values. Traditional action is behaviors that are determined by habit or long-standing custom. An example could be, you put on clothes every day, right? You do it because that's what you're supposed to do, unless you live in a nudist colony, in which case you don't put on clothes every day, and you're doing that because that is your tradition. So an individual's conduct is shaped not by a concern with maximizing efficiency or commitment to an ethical principle, but it's really an unreflective adherence to an established routine. It's not questioned. Traditional action is all about doing things because it's what was done. And then the last here that he talks about is effective action. This behavior is driven by impulsiveness or unchecked emotions. So you can think of it as an emotional action where someone acts on their feelings instead of thinking about the consequences. It's that time you send the email without deleting what you really think, right? So effective action can be, the kind of heat of the moment emotional choices. So ideal types are just Weber's categories of social action. They serve as ideal types or analytical constructs against which real-life cases can be compared. But such pure categories are not realistic in concrete cases, but instead are a conceptual yardstick for examining differences and similarities as well as causal connections between the social processes that are under investigation. Okay, moving on to some more of his intellectual influences and core ideas. Distinction between the natural and the social sciences is something that Weber was interested in, and the methodology is appropriate to each. So the boundary separating biology, chemistry, and physics from disciplines like history, economics, or psychology, or of course sociology, was really an outgrowth of German idealism and the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. So Kant, not that we have all the time to also talk about this guy, but I'll give you a little bit here. Kant was an Enlightenment thinker that wanted to know how humans could be good and kind without the influence of religion. Kant grew up poor, and his family was religious, and their faith helped them get through hardships. He saw religion as useful in creating social cohesion. While he thought the move away from Christianity was good for society, he worried that people are bad without it. So he developed what he called the categorical imperative, which basically means the golden rule you've heard of, right? Do unto others kind of idea. So he thought that people could use this as a way to judge behavior as good or bad outside of religion. So for instance, cheating and not telling your partner may seem fine to you, but the categorical imperative means you have to be okay with that also happening to you, right? Are you okay lying to your partner? Well, are you okay with your partner lying to you? So basically, the categorical imperative is a lens to see our behavior in less personal terms. So Weber built a lot of his ideas based on Kant's philosophy. And Weber's notion of sociology is an interpretive science based on Verstehen, or understanding, and his focus on constructing ideal types marks his ties to this debate. He was also impacted by Dilthey and Rickert. So it was Dilthey who articulated the view that historical studies and the social sciences more generally should seek to understand particular events and the relationship to specific contexts in which they occur. In Weber's built his own kind of definition of sociology on those ideas. For Weber, scientific knowledge is distinguished from non-scientific analyses on how such studies are carried out. For Rickert, the natural sciences were driven by the deductive search for universal laws. Conversely, the social sciences were committed to producing inductive descriptions of historically specific phenomena. And then looking at determination of causality, right? I'm sure if you've taken those fun stats classes, you already know where I'm going with this. So Weber sought to forge a middle ground between the generating of abstract laws characteristic of the natural sciences and the accumulation of historically specific facts that guide the social sciences. To this end, he cast the determination of causality as an attempt to establish the probability that a series of actions are related. So again, looking more at this is a likely result of an action versus this is what will happen, right? Causality is, variable X causes variable Y to change, right? While we know in a lot of social factors, probability is an important factor. So Weber's notion of causality is fundamentally different from the conventional scientific usage, which sees it as the positing of invariant and necessary relationships between variables. According to Weber, the complexities of social life make it unamenable to formulate strict, generalizable causal arguments, such as those found in the natural sciences. Okay, and then a lot of his work looks at rationalization. And when Weber talks about this, he's referring to an ongoing process in which the social interaction in institutions become increasingly governed by methodological procedures and calculable rules. So, in steering the course of societal development, values, traditions, and emotions were being displaced in favor of formal, impersonal, bureaucratic practices. So, some of this ideology stands on Nietzsche, another really important philosophical thinker that, unless you already took a philosophy class, you might not know a lot about him. So, Weber was reluctant to champion the progress brought by science and technological advances, kind of influenced by Nietzsche's own nihilistic view of modernity, expressed by his assertion that God is dead and we have killed him. So again, we could do a whole separate lecture on Nietzsche. He's an interesting read, but basically, he was pointing out what a crazy change it was that religion's impact waned. Religion gave people meaning and told them they were part of something larger and meaningful. It says that we're all equal and we'll get our rewards in the afterlife. So there's a super quick change in society that, life is not being impacted as strongly by kind of Christianity in the Western world. So life without religion is scary for most people to contemplate. What meaning is there if there's no God? So whether or not the spiritual void created by disenchantment of the modern world would continue was for Weber an open question. In addition to drawing from Nietzsche's work, much of Weber's writing reflects a critical engagement with an extension of Marxist theory of historical materialism. Although finding much convincing Marxist argument, he does not embrace it in its entirety, right? He doesn't really think there's going to be this socialist revolution, all that kind of fun stuff. So some of the differences between Weber and Marx. First, Weber maintained that social life did not evolve according to some imminent or necessary law, right? So Marx was really looking at conflict and how social evolution progressed from that kind of conflict. He argued that the development of societies could not be adequately explained on the basis of a single or primary causal mechanism. So Weber's saying it's more than just social class. Weber argues that ideas also play a central role in shaping paths in society. Another difference lies where the two theorists located a fundamental problem facing modern industrial society. For Weber, it wasn't capitalism, but the process of rationalization and the increasing dominance of bureaucracies that threatened to destroy creativity and individuality. By design, bureaucratic organizations and the rational procedures that govern them routinize and standardize people and projects. And that's kind of what was the most concerning to Weber. Okay, looking briefly at Weber's theoretical orientation. Weber explicitly recognized that individual action is channeled through a variety of motivations that encompass both rationalist and non-rationalist dimensions, those 4 dimensions of action, of social action he talked about. And his definitions of sociology as a science aimed at the interpretive understanding of social action squarely places the individual and their conduct at the center of analysis. Weber also examined religion as he studied the worldviews of 5 major world religions, showing the way that religious ideas have a profound impact on an individual's actions and consequently the broader society. He saw religions as serving an important social psychological function by providing a system of meaning that explains the existence of suffering and evil in the world. He also looked at the rationalization of reality, as all religions seek to explain a senseless world with conviction that the world is ruled by reason and fate and can be known. In this way, religions have fostered a rationalization of reality, meaning it's God's will. That's why things happened, right? The Lord works in mysterious ways, that kind of crap. So knowing how to redeem oneself and how to obtain salvation requires that one knows how the world works. According to Weber, this knowledge and the process of rationalization it has fueled has been shaped by 2 ideal types of prophecies: exemplary prophecy and emissary prophecy. So what the hell does that mean? Well, in religions grounded by exemplary prophecy, religions like Buddhism or Hinduism, Adherents seek salvation through extraordinary psychic states that are attained through mystical, orgiastic, or ecstatic experiences that are far removed from everyday practical conduct, right? Meaning you go pray at the top of that mountain, or you say Om and meditate and you achieve enlightenment. In contrast, emissary prophecy is rooted in a conception of a personal God who's vengeful and loving, forgiving and punishing, and who demands the faithful, active, ethical conduct in order to serve his commandments. Religions based on emissary prophecy, such as Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they require the devout to actively master the world according to the will of their God. So religious rationalizations of the world have their most significant influence on those who are religiously devout and follow those belief systems. Okay, moving on to Weber and his Protestant ethic in the spirit of capitalism. So Weber was interested in the rationalizing tendencies that were so prevalent in Western society and the role of ideas in shaping those tendencies. So Weber argued that it was ideas that created capitalism. He believed the Protestant ethic played a central role in the rise and eventual dominance of Western capitalism. Significantly, Weber did not argue the Protestant ethic caused the emergence and growth of Western capitalism. It's more about the ideas. So we'll get to there in a moment. Before we can understand that, you have to understand the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation was a 16th century religious movement intended to reform the beliefs and practices of the Catholic Church. By challenging the beliefs and practices, the Reformation upended the Church's religious and political authority. Protestant reformers said that everyone has a direct relationship to God, and salvation lies in his hand, not in the hands of the church clergy. So Protestantism, specifically Calvinism, created different ideas than Catholicism that was very strong and prominent at the time. Specifically, Protestants felt guilty. They didn't get their sins forgiven like Catholics. They thought they would be judged for their deeds, so they wanted to prove their goodness through work and, virtue through hard work, right? So the work ethic is because God likes hard workers, right? The whole idea, God rewards those who help themselves kind of thing. And all work is considered holy to Protestants, not just the work done by religious clergy. So they were moral in whatever was their work. They also believed strongly in serving their community. And they did not believe in miracles, which Weber called disenchantment of the world, because again, people instead turn to science for answers. Why does the sun rise? Right? These kind of things. Oh, because we're circling the sun, right? That kind of idea. Instead of like, oh, because God says it's a new day and the sun is now risen, right? So people turned to science for answers, which led to technological breakthroughs, which of course then supported the rise of capitalism. So while Marx says religion's the opiate of the masses, which makes people passive so they'll accept capitalism, Weber said that people didn't tolerate capitalism because of religion. They became capitalists because of their religion. So far from being a light cloak or care for external goods, this iron cage has become central to the personal identity and sense of self of people today. Meaning, goods and products made through capitalism define ourselves. So we define ourselves through the cars we drive, the clothes we wear, the places we vacation, the neighborhoods we live in, rather than through a sense of ultimate purpose or meaning to life. So like Marx's views on the fetishism of commodities and the Blend's notion of conspicuous consumption, the iron cage has imprisoned us in the pursuit of the lifestyles of the rich and famous, whether or not we can afford to live like the rich people. Okay, he also looked at the influence of power in society, especially within politics. So power to Weber was a chance to realize your own will. Weber defines it as, again, quote, a chance of a man or of a number of men, hint, the time period, to recognize their own will in a social action or even against the resistance of others. Power may be exercised for economic gain, to increase one's status, or for its own sake. And so class is just people sharing life chances. They're not stable groups or communities produced by existing property relations. Instead, they're people who share life chances or possibilities that are determined by an economic interest in the possession of goods and opportunities for income within a commodity and labor market. Weber nevertheless argued that classes are themselves the product of a shared class situation, a situation that reflects the type and amount of exchanges one can pursue in the market. Status groups are communities. The fate of status groups is determined not by their chances on the commodity or labor market, but by a specific positive or negative social estimation of honor. So for us, the social estimation of honor would mean something like respect or prestige. So this kind of quote-unquote honor is expressed through styles of life or conventions that identify individuals with specific social circles. Race, ethnicity, religion, taste in fashion and the arts, occupation. These things have often formed as a basis for making status distinctions. More than anything, membership in a status group serves to restrict an individual's chances for social interaction. Weber says that classes, status groups, and political parties affect a person's place in society and can vary independently, right? You can be high status but have low class, etc. Okay, Weber also defines 3 ideal types of authority or legitimate domination. Because again, power then manifests itself into society and into societal institutions, so he was interested in this as well. Traditional authority is authority of, quote, eternal yesterday. Basically, it rests on traditions. So, when a king dies, then somebody takes their place. It's usually someone who is in their family bloodline, right? That kind of idea. That the belief and tradition really relied on folklore and divinity for kings to maintain power. Subjects owe their allegiance not to bureaucratically imposed laws that are open to change, but to a master who demands their compliance and loyalty. And those things are made legitimate through traditions, like, things that are considered sacred that are legitimated by sacred traditions. While charismatic authority is, about the charisma that's possessed by a leader. Heroic individuals could rise to power because of their personality and change everything through passion and will. Demands for obedience are legitimated through the leader's gift of grace, which is demonstrated through extraordinary feats or acts of heroism, revelations, or, in short, the miracles of heroes and prophets. In its rejection of both tradition and rational, formal rules, charismatic authority by its very nature poses a challenge to existing political orders. So charismatic authority is really fascinating too, because there's kind of 2 sides to this coin. You kind of have to think about what are the intentions of this charismatic authority. So for instance, some charismatic authority people that come to mind when talking about, people whose personality motivated people to follow them, you can think of people at the very despotic, authoritarian end of the spectrum, like Hitler or someone like that rose to power largely by blaming Jewish people for the woes of German society at the time. But at the same time, a charismatic authority could be someone like Martin Luther King Jr., right, who through his own gift of grace and extraordinary feats or acts of heroism, his willingness to be on the front lines, to, protest, to confront this, to give these speeches, to kind of put himself out there. Not only was he monitored by the FBI and all of that, and then of course, assassinated, he was very powerful in shaping hearts and minds of people when it came to what was just and what wasn't in society. So charismatic authority really challenges existing political orders, because it's really about people following someone because they believe in them. But the factors that make for revolutionary potential of charismatic authority also make it very unstable. Charisma only lasts as long as the possessor is able to provide benefits for their followers. So if the leader's prophecies are proven wrong, if enemies are not defeated, if miraculous deeds don't happen, then the legitimacy can be called into question. So often the transferring of authority eventually leads to this routinization of charisma, the transformation of legitimacy into an either rational, legal, or traditional type. So, it's interesting, like, you can kind of see that with Trump in a lot of ways. He was a charismatic authority, especially back in, 2016. But as his big lie saying that the election was stolen, they lost dozens of lawsuits about this. There's really no material proof to prove that. Yes, there's still some people that believe him, but the amount of people that believe him versus believed him at the beginning are just radically different, meaning he can't make good on his promises, on his prophecies. And so as a result, that charismatic authority is going to wane eventually once people wake up. Okay, and then rational legal authority are just how modern states are ruled, right? So the country you live in, right? That's it's bureaucratic authority. So this form of domination is based on the rule of rationality. So meaning the rationality that we have in society makes its way into the laws that are written. It's a system of belief. Basically, you believe in the system itself. You follow the rules because they are the rules, not because the king's telling you, not because this guy you like is saying to do it. But, the problem really becomes, if it's just about following the rules, who gets to make the rules? For Weber, rationalization was the defining feature of the modern age, and he was worried about it because it can be really easy to lose our reflexivity and get locked into a thoughtless routine, which leads us to an iron cage of bureaucratic capitalism that we cannot escape. There ceases to be meanings behind the rules, right? Why are you doing that? Well, because section 5, subset B says I have to do this. And you're like, but why is that the rule? Right? We kind of lose sight of the why of, does this make sense? Is this even rational? Okay, so moving back to bureaucracies. Bureaucracies were so much of his work and so much of his legacy that we still understand. It's actually even more so the case in our time period than it was in Weber's. So he was very prophetic in a lot of these ways. So bureaucracies have become the dominant form of social organization in modern society. Despite whatever failings that bureaucracies may have, the form of organization that it has is very essential to modern life. It's almost as essential as the air we breathe, largely because it organizes so much. Rationalization creates bureaucracies, and they're composed of hierarchies of positions with an extremely clear chain of command. This is the technical superiority of bureaucracies. Hierarchy is made up of a lot of different specialized roles that's held together with a formal written communication. People gain their position through merit, which reduces the likelihood of incompetence that can result from appointing officials through nepotism or by virtue of tradition. Also, a specialized division of labor allows for more efficient completion of assigned tasks. And bureaucracies are governed by formal, impersonal rules that regulate all facets of the organization. So as a result, predictability of action in the strategic planning that it makes it possible are better guaranteed. But while that's true, there's also a sort of loss of individual freedom that can come with the rise of bureaucracy. Although in important respects, bureaucracies are dependent on the development of mass democracy for their fullest expression, they nevertheless create new elite groups of experts and technocrats. Weber contended that the formal rules and procedures in bureaucracies lead to a loss of individual freedom. The bureaucrat themselves adopts the detached, objective attitudes on which the efficiency and predictability of bureaucracies depend, which creates an impersonal experience, but organizes vast amounts of info, and we rely on many of them. So just let me give you a brief example. Think about the last time you went to the DMV, right? It is a uncaring, impersonal experience. Yet, think about how many people's information that they organize. Right, like if you're in California, like myself, and you go to the DMV, they have the driving information for millions of people, right? They've organized all of this. And when you go in, you get a certain number. They tell you which window to go to. That one person deals with your specific issue. The idea is there's a hierarchy of, who does what. Everyone has a very specialized role. If you go to window B, it's going to be different than window C as far as what they do, and they don't know each other's jobs, which makes it very impersonal and uncaring, because let's say you make a mistake on your form or you're not really sure what to do. Like, for instance, I had this situation happen years ago, true story. I bought a car from some random little dealer guy after I had gotten in a car accident, and I used the insurance money I got for a new car. And apparently when the guy filled out the paperwork, he put in my VIN number incorrectly. For where there's supposed to be a 0, he put an O, the letter O. So then the DMV is like, this is invalid, etc., etc. You got to do all this crap. So I go down there. I explain what the problem is. They put me in line. I go through the whole process, and that person goes, nope, that's not me. You're going to have to go to this other thing. So I go through that whole other thing, wait another 30 minutes, go through that. Then they're like, nope, you have to go get in the vehicle inspection line to like validate your VIN number. I'm like, okay, fine. So I go do the vehicle inspection thing. They get to me, and then they're like, why are you in this line? This isn't for you. All you have to do is call this phone number. And I was like, what? But I don't believe you anymore because that's already happened to me 3 times. So I call the phone number while I'm physically in the DMV because now at this point, I don't believe anybody. And then the phone number just refers me to a website. And they say, okay, what you're supposed to do is take a picture of the VIN, take a picture of your paperwork, and upload it to this thing, and they will email you within 24 hours. So again, don't think it's real, but I'm like, okay, fine, that's what I'm supposed to do. So I take a picture, I do the thing, and I submit it. 24 hours goes by. No response. So I do it again, submit it again, make sure everything's, on the level, everything's there. I double check, okay, submit it again. Nothing happens. 72 hours goes by, nothing happens. I submit it a 3rd time and just pray. And then about 6 months later, I get my paperwork saying, your VIN number's incorrect, you have to go to the DMV. So my experience just shows that like if I had a clear thing that was a problem, like, okay, this tag needs to be updated or this ID needs to be confirmed or something like that, then there's like a pretty clear procedure for that. There's a certain window you go to, there's a certain person. But if you have a certain problem that's a little bit different than the specialized tasks, you're going to have a hell of a time getting it addressed because each person's going to push you down the line to the next person, right? In the same kind of way, if you've ever been to admissions and records at your college, then you know that you got to fill out the right form and have it signed in the right way and turned into the right window, or none of that works. And again, think about a college or a university, the amount of information they have to organize and basically be able to serve that many people. Every time you want to declare a major or change some specific status or whatever it might be, you have to go through this whole process with them. And there's a lot of very specific, specialized jobs. These people only deal with student stuff. These people only deal with faculty stuff. These people only deal with this, or that. You can't even pay in admissions. You have to then separately go to the bursar's office just for the payment part, right? So everything's very specialized, and that's how you keep, these huge organizations running, right? Because if you think about a college or a university, the fact that they have enough information to make sure that every class, there's not like another class that shows up in the middle of class. Like every classroom is scheduled for a certain time, a certain day, that they're able to kind of, other than like overselling parking passes, that's a whole other problem. But, other than that, there's a lot of information that they do on the back end that make everything else possible for the college or university to function, or for the DMV or people to be able to drive on the roads or that kind of thing. So bureaucracies are one of those things, we're not going to get rid of them. They're incredibly important. And later on, when we talk about more modern theories, we'll kind of build upon what Weber's saying in a more, modern sense, with how this takes place, especially through globalization and otherwise, to kind of challenge some of the problematic natures of bureaucracies and how it's made its way into almost the new service economy of work as well. So anyway, that's about it for today. Thanks for sticking with me.